Well, I'm John McDonagh. I live in Ballinaguard, Ballyneety, County Limerick. I first left Ireland, I suppose, permanently in 1988 when I went to Turkey. I qualified as a teacher in 1985 and there was no jobs in Ireland. Well, I was lucky. I got a part-time job in Bray in County Wicklow. And then I did interviews for a job in Saudi Arabia, which I didn't get. But I did an interview in the Turkish embassy in Dublin and got a job in Turkey. So I went out to Istanbul and I taught there for a year. And that was fabulous. Now it was a big culture shock. I eventually ended up working in England the following year, and that was far less of a culture shock because London would be a place that most Irish people would have a familiarity with. But Turkey was great. It was totally different. I worked as an English language teacher in a very large school. There was about 3,000 pupils in the school, and Turkey was wonderful. But very, very different. Very formal education system. The students were so polite. They would stand up and button their jumper when they spoke to you. They were incredibly polite. The climate was lovely. The food was wonderful, and the people were extremely friendly. But Istanbul was chaotic. It really was a chaotic place. When it rained, the streets were just mud, and I wasn't used to that. But I grew up in Dublin, in a big city, and I enjoyed Istanbul. Very, very exciting place, and the people were wonderful. Really, really nice people. And the education system was very good out there. There was great inequality in Istanbul as well. The pupils in my school were very privileged. And most of them were sons, it was a boys' school, most of them were sons of chiefs of staff in the army because they had a military coup in Turkey. Not after I arrived. I wasn't the cause of that, I don't think, directly. But the army had a pretty strong grip on the country. But Turkey was wonderful, and it really opened my eyes to, I think, of course, it's a Muslim country, but it's officially a secular country as well. In fact, it's a lot more secular than Ireland. The separation in church and state is very strong. But it was terrific. I loved Istanbul. And I taught there for a year, but it was only a 1-year contract. But I got very ill out there. I got hepatitis A from the oral fecal route, to get very medicinal about it, from apparently a waiter who was doing my salad didn't wash his hands. I won't go into too much detail if people listen to this over lunch, but I was only there in a 1-year contract, and I did get very sick, and I really didn't trust the health service over there. It was almost reminding me of the health service here. So I came back to Ireland, recuperated, and wasn't overly keen on going back out to Turkey. So again, things hadn't changed in Ireland. There was no work to be had for a teacher here. So there was tons of jobs in the UK, loads of them. And I think by the late 80s, beginning of the 90s, things were beginning to change for Irish people in the UK. The cool Irish, started to appear. The kind of Dara O'Briens, the beginning of the Dara O'Brien culture began to emerge. And I was happy to go to England, to be honest. You can look back on things in a very different light. You can reimagine what you were thinking at the time. I was lonely to leave Ireland, absolutely, but there really was no alternative but to leave Ireland. Like the 1980s, it was a grim time. I think more people emigrated from Ireland in the 80s than ever after the famine, or even in the 1940s. So we had no option but to leave. The only option then was to do part-time work in Ireland. So I was glad to get a job. And I also think we came from a generation in the 80s which was used to travelling. We had taken an interrail trip around Europe. A lot of my friends went abroad. A lot went to Australia, went to England, went to America. So it wasn't an uncommon thing for people to travel. And travel was becoming a lot cheaper as well. And of course, a lot of my family had travelled as well. I had a brother in still have a brother in Saudi Arabia. I've one in Norway and a sister in America. She was all over the world. She was in Hong Kong and the Philippines. So it was kind of in our blood to travel. So I missed Ireland, missed a lot about Ireland, but also I think a lot of us were excited to leave as well. I think it was a good thing to leave. It's good for you to get out of the country, just to experience somewhere different. Plus it's nice being foreign abroad. There's a kind of a cachet goes with it a bit. You can get away with spoofing as well tremendously. Because you can spoof away with your accent, you can spoof away on what you did, and no one can find out, which is great. We moved in 1998 when Patrick was born, the third child, and I think one of the things we missed when we had children was cousins and communions and someone to look after our kids for free. I think the kids missed, not having that kind of family base. And we've 21 cousins on Trish's side and 9 on my side, and I think they missed that kind of camaraderie, and that's been wonderful. It really has been, and it's been great to come home and touch base. Like, my parents are both in their 70s and Trish's mother's in her 90s, and keeping in touch with them was very difficult from a distance because you'd feel guilty permanently and you'd be on the phone, and Easter and summer, but you'd spend all your time going back to your parents' house to make sure they were okay, and that wasn't easy, but it's much easier now that we're back. Even when you come back to visit, you don't really get a flavour of how things have changed. You see surface changes. People were drinking coffee in Ireland when we came back. I never drank coffee before. It was all instant Nescafe. Now that you had, real mochas and cappuccinos and all, I noticed great changes in Ireland and a much more positive attitude in Ireland. And plus you have immigration, net immigration in Ireland, which is wonderful. Now, it'll have its teething problems because Ireland simply isn't used to immigration. But immigration is a wonderful bonus for Ireland. It's going to change Ireland rapidly and change our attitudes. I just noticed a greater sense of confidence in Ireland. People being proud of being Irish and proud of our economy. And I think that still is there. There's great self-confidence in Ireland. Which is reflected in a whole variety of ways. And that is the major change. In the 80s, Paul Durkin talks about Ireland being in black and white in the 80s. I think it's now in colour, in widescreen.